This is how I believe the current state of the world can be improved. As every scientific field has a code of ethics that they expect their peers to uphold, I figured a short subjective deviation from the main theory of everything that I have shared thus far in this Dimensionalism video series is acceptable and relevant. There's a lot of depth into what I'm about to say, so I recommend reading the final Intro to Dimensionalism paper after this, and take this last part in piece by piece. Link will be in the description. There are many beliefs held by an uncomfortable amount of people that have proven themselves to be underlyingly false. Those who hold these notions dearly oftentimes defend them with self-righteous vigor, hatred, and an observable destruction to the world, their communities, and to their own psyche. Nations divide over these ideas. Families split, spit, and shun for them. People bring death because of notions held by the thoughtless. And as like attracts like, as like often does outside of the electromagnetic realm, the unthinking majority are led by their heart-driven role models, those whose desires amplify their own wishes. You know the ideologies that I speak of. And as one who is part of the critically thinking minority, I say, rather than burning individuals at the stake, let us instead burn the notions of blind hate, meaningless destruction, and falsehoods within our own minds. The death of a notion like that is a beautiful thing, because the remaining null hypothesis will, at worst, leave you apathetic and agnostic. But more commonly, you will discover a newfound mental freedom to ask yourself, as well as others, if other hypotheses would lead to a graded, albeit subjective, quantity of love, life, and truth, intrinsically, altruistically, and more significantly. Now, even though I may use an abundant amount of mental energy to try to persuade you to question if any of the beliefs you currently have are valid or not, I cannot and will not force you to do so, for that is far too authoritarian for my liking. If it is your prerogative to remain closed-minded and continue to hold beliefs regardless of evidence to the contrary, be my guest. You can go your own way. If you would rather be naive and be so open-minded as to lose and change your opinions at the slightest hint of contradictory evidence, without even an attempt to defend and research to uphold the opinions you already hold, you can be my guest there too. You can go your own way. But if you would like to find a happy medium between these two states, discover your own sort of theory of general relativity while simultaneously holding and obtaining information with care and skepticism, you can be our guest, comrade. We can go our own separate ways together. These notions of going your own way so far as you don't hate, harm, degrade, kill, or lie to others or yourself are at the core of my own way, which I personally like to call dimensionalism. Love, life, and truth. Love entities other than yourself, respecting your own entity as well. The love of life should motivate your movement towards greater justices, and the love of truth will increase your wisdom. Epistemology should be taught everywhere so that people can learn to think for themselves. Life in itself is growth. Grow as an individual. Grow in love. Grow in truth. How? By going your own way and figuring it out for yourself. Use your head. It's not rocket science. There are so many ways an individual can grow, so go after the ways that excite you the most. I'd say to grow in truth, however, considering the words of naysayers is important, and accepting the possibility that your personal truth will be contrary to empirical truth in some regard is important also. And the truth about truth is that it is almost always subjective. But for the objective truths that we can apply to our particular universe, if you cannot test it, you cannot definitively say that it is true. If you can test it, it must be falsifiable. And if a hypothesis fails a certain test, and does so in multiple variations of the test, the claim should be rejected. If a hypothesis passes the test, you should still test it again to verify its accuracy. And lastly, correlation does not indicate causation. As the Bible accurately portrays in the book of Ecclesiastes, which I quote in part, there is a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to embrace, a time to refrain from embracing, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. But although there is a time to kill, destroy, hate, and make war, as we go our own ways, we should seek to minimize these times to our best ability. And if you are looking for a dogmatic list of ways to avoid a destructive lifestyle and ways to act in a productive manner, I'd say that you are most likely wasting your time. You have a brain. Use it. Rather than looking for a dogmatic list outside of yourself, write out a list of life guiding principles for yourself. Refine them yourself. Bounce these ideas off of other people to make sure that they make sense. And if they're still good by that point, follow them yourself. And don't condemn others for not following your personal list of virtues. But I will tell that a productive morality is not objective. In fact, all of morality, and all of what we intrinsically consider good and evil, is very subjective when empathetically considered from another perspective. We can make generalizations such as murder is wrong or charity is right. But it is rarely, however, absolute. For example, murder is right when it is done against murderers, but we reclassify that sort of action as an execution, as justice, as self-defense, or as war, even though the act of murder is still going on. And being charitable is wrong when it is done by the dirt poor of the world, because when their own children die of starvation, their charity is reclassified as negligent and irresponsible, even though the act itself is still charitable. In essence, what I'm saying is that we as a society decide what is evil, and that standard evolves over time. But you, as an individual, decides what is good for yourself. But beware whenever your personal good crosses the line of the collective evil, because you will be punished if the public catches eye of your negative deviancy. Even when you choose to do good beyond what is the societal standard of good in your time, you should still be cautious. Both positive and negative deviant actions have caused individuals to be incarcerated. There are only a few truly objective truths in the oxymoronic way of dimensionalism, and yet I can only bring myself to reiterate the same truth twice. Everything is subjective, and there is always an exception to the rule. And I guess the best way to teach these truths to you is by showing you an example. As I speak at this moment, the speed of light, again, is 299,792,458 meters per second. Now, according to the many worlds theory, which is partially confirmed in dimensionalism, there are a great number of me's that exist. And this speed of light number should be the same across all of our various observable universes, since its calculation in constancy was done and solidified long before I, Tim Snavely, was born. But there within this theory should contain universes where the fundamental constants of the universe are capable of being different at higher dimensions, specifically at the fourth time dimension. And if there were observers within those universes where the speed of light was faster or slower than ours, our objective fact, the speed of light being 299,792,458 meters per second, would be wrong to them. Either that, or their measurements of meter and second would be wrong to us. Even our own individual existence being certain and unique is negligible when our unique self is just one of infinite cells that split every Planck second, and we've logically deduced in part 1 that anything within everything, when divided an infinite number of times, equals nothing. But to say that we definitively don't exist is kind of crazy and contradictory, so let me clarify on this point. Our existence in this observable universe, this mass-electric space-time, is real. Our existence from the perspective of absolutely everything, however, that does exist, would make it appear as if we don't exist. So what is there? What objectively exists beyond ourselves and the dimensions? I did a little thought experiment with myself on what exactly is fundamental beyond the 10 primary dimensions, and I came up with 3 related phenomena that seem to meet this criteria on some level. Math, physics, and logic. And these all rely on each other in some degree. We try to make sense of physics with math, and we try to make sense of math with logic. And we also try to make sense of the observations we make with physics with logic. So to the scientists who say, shut up and calculate, when they imply that predictions in physics require numbers to be taken seriously, even though I agree with that statement in general, I believe that the phrase, shut up and think, is more appropriate in these scenarios. Because although we define the laws of physics with mathematical equations, the rules of math are governed by logic. So if physics is based on math, and math is based on logic, then physics is based on logic, and makes logic the most fundamental of these 3 phenomena. Just think, How could 0 divided by 0 function as the first mover's function to calculate everything without the logic of division to be able to execute what we observe to our little snippet of everything? Yes, the 0th dimension is indeed the full realm of quantitative measurements. So somehow, by some paradoxical miracle of sorts, logic is contained within the point. But the point is never really reachable, so in that case, I guess perfect logic also doesn't exist. Oh gosh, I shouldn't go into this rabbit hole of a notion. Some say that the logic was distinct and apart from the 0th dimension, naming it God. But I say, giving this non-zero deity of first logic any attributes beyond having logic is illogical, dishonest, and deluding, simply because we don't have definitive proof. We don't know. And if you do claim to know, you should probably go back and listen to the Truth About Truth section again, because apparently you didn't get it the first time. Our lack of knowledge on a subject means that we can't assert any particular conclusion as the one true conclusion until convincing evidence comes forth. This is again a key feature of dimensionalism. I am not claiming knowledge of what happened prior to everything. What I am doing, however, is providing a reasonable null hypothesis to throw into the list of possibilities for the first cause of everything, and a means to test and measure everything on the basis of the knowledge we do hold. Next, we are going to be looking into the concept of choice and free will. Although the choices we make are important to our finding love, life, and truth, a lot of the changes that can result in our livelihood becoming noticeably better or worse is outside of our ability to control. As I was creating the concept of dimensionalism during the COVID-19 pandemic of 2020 AD, I can testify that I had no way of avoiding being temporarily laid off from my job. I cannot control which people in my community will be sick and transmit the virus to someone else who will die in this timeline. A layperson cannot control stupid people, and even an authoritarian government cannot control smart people. You would need to allow yourself to become a bully or a person capable of evil acts to contort someone's will to fit your own. Even attempts to positively manipulate people's lives like what I am doing here has an undeniable dark side to it that I avoid. For me, it is an aversion so strong, I am willing to sacrifice my reputation just so I don't have to cower to darker persuasion tactics. This virtue of mine has definitely proven itself valuable on multiple occasions. The only person we can truly control, albeit not completely in some cases, is ourselves. And even then, the execution of our actions can turn out so horribly wrong that a deterministic mindset may be the best explanation for that seemingly impossible sequence of events to unfold the way it did. If you were to argue in favor of the concept of free will, making claims to the second time dimension would be your best bet. The argument would go something like this. The solidarity of our consciousness can traverse the second time dimension's plane of possibilities. Our past is locked in. All of the fundamental particles of the universe have been synchronized with an infinite amount of timelines identical to our own, even though there has ever only been one timeline. But from our perspective, our present is currently the only viable point of singularity from which we can, in essence, change the future by choosing which timeline we will lock into place and become a solid past we can reflect on. But, as a general rule, if you plan your steps, prepare for the unlikely, and avoid exhausting your resources, you can truthfully make the claim, I am exercising self-control. But we cannot change that we will all one day return to the great nothingness. Death is inevitable. Yes, I just claimed that quantum immortality is not a thing. Hunger, defecation, heck even breathing can be considered stressful. And the cells that make up our entities need to perfectly execute their reproduction while never having to encounter harmful viruses, radiation, or bacteria that could cause cellular decay. So the quantum immortal version of us would have, after somehow going through a perfect stress-free birth, 1. Eaten the perfect amount of nutrients every day for the entirety of its life from its birth to never dying. 2. Have tubes inserted without cutting or tearing yourself to seamlessly remove the waste that the body produces. 3. Become comatose to prevent any worrying intelligible thoughts from arising. And even after all these things of being taken care of at the macro level, 4. The quantum immortal individual would have to be perfectly shielded from all harmful radiation at all times. And 5. Even then, have their individual cells do their reproductive function perfectly for an eternity. And since we do not exist in a timeline where all of the macro conditions that reduce life at the cellular level are eliminated, you will 100% die. But we can change our actions to prolong the inevitable and continue experiencing our minuscule portion of the great somethingness for longer and or more vibrant periods of time. The whole nature of causality is like a domino effect. One domino can knock over many paths of dominoes, but as observers we can choose, in fact we must choose, which domino path we see. For as things stand right now, we can only observe one domino path fall at a time, so to speak. Will you follow the domino path that leads to the bedroom, the path that leads to the bathroom, or to the kitchen? You can only ever be in one place at once. Again, for another analogy, causality can be likened as a stream of rivers branching off from each other, and as we kayak down the river of time, we can choose left or right, lollipop or apple, pizza or sex, video game or shopping, movie or biking, but we can ever go down one of those river branches at a time. Sure, you can multitask, but how many things can you fully immerse yourself in and experience at the same time? You can only ever be in one place at once. So the fact that both domino paths fall and that both rivers continue to flow is the truth in determinism. The fact that you can only ever see one domino path fall or one river pathway at a time is the truth in free will. You can go your own way. Oxymoronically, you must go your own way. You don't really have a choice in the matter. I guess you could subjugate yourself to another entity's way, but still, how you act within your subjugation is still your own way. To close out this video, to maintain a level of realism and humility, we should recognize that we only ever get to observe 100 odd years of our universe, which has been going on for billions of years prior, and will continue for trillions of years after. And of that universe, we get to be orbiting around one star out of trillions of stars. And even then, of the infinite number of quantum possibilities of what could happen during those 100 odd years of life, we only ever get to see one determinate timeline. Live long and prosper in love and truth, my friend. The great nothingness that comes after can wait for you just a little while longer. Just like the great somethingness waited for us to become a part of the everything we see now.